I'm at the studio at Pulse in Geelong, our studio where we record our program, and we've got a special guest in the studio at the moment. So I'm just actually outside the studio. They're all in there. The news is on, and so we've got Colin in there, Colin Mockett, who does his global view, and we've got Mick, and Tony is running the panel today. But we have a special guest. He's the CEO of Pulse FM, 94.7, Pulse FM, and he has a special announcement. So we're doing a live so that we can get this on video and be able to share it, because I think that what he's going to say is going to be really exciting, especially for the Sustainable Hour and everything that we stand for. So we've got Rusty's out today. He's actually interviewing John Hewson, who's an ex-Liberal leader. He's a professor. He's doing some wonderful things on the climate emergency as well. So he's out there, Rusty, and I'm just looking in. We've got the news on, but I'm going to creep in there now. The door's very thick, so I'm just creeping in. I'm going to turn the camera on so you can actually see the studio.
Michael Martinez, you've been in our radio studio a couple of times over the years because you have talked about climate change. In the media, you've had, written pieces about that you are concerned, and you've taken that concern in a way to a new level. Tell us about it.
We're declaring a climate emergency.
Yay! Arms up! Did you hear it?
Yes.
This is what we have been working for since we started in 2016. This has been the radio show that has been talking about that we need to declare a climate emergency at all levels. And while we don't know whether Geelong Council is doing it, we're now seeing a private company. Or tell us about who is it that's doing it now?
Well, for us, it's the Ethnic Communities Council of Geelong. So
okay.
I'll just read our value statement, which we've had for about 14 years. Dignity, respect and acceptance are basic values defining our humanity and must be afforded to every individual in our society. We value an ecologically sustainable environment and promote and celebrate harmony, cultural diversity, peace and social justice in our society. So the ethnic communities, with having that value statement, can't stand by any longer and have business as usual.
Yeah, exactly. And because climate change is not just any longer about temperatures and science in that way. It's a social issue.
Yep.
Because people, that anxiety that we see out there among the young people, do you know what that will turn into in a couple of years if politicians keep doing nothing? I can predict it. It's not going to look pretty.
Well, I think in terms of the work we do with refugees, we have a responsibility to talk about what is actually happening. Now, we're working with, at the moment, we're getting about 400 refugees a year to Geelong, and they're from a broad variety of places like the Congo, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. So all these places they're going to be more affected by climate change in many ways than those of us living comfortable lives in here. So I think if we think that it's an emergency at the moment, it's going to, well, I know the reasons why we're declaring an emergency, but it's going to get worse in terms of potentially climate migration, climate refugees, and I don't think that is something the government has thought about or discussed. And in my field, we're taking this leadership role because we think it's critically important to the future of our society, and I've also made the announcement that we've other ethnic communities, hopefully the Victorian Ethnic Communities Council and FECA, the Federation of Ethnic Communities Council of Australia, they might take it up, and I'm meeting with the CEO of FECA on Friday. So we want to pursue that more with him and discuss it with him, the possibility of FECA making that announced
at a national level then.
At a national level,
But tell me, you must have heard all the criticism that there is at the moment and which the councillors seem to be listening to, such as that, this is just empty words. There was even a big article or a letter in the Addy, the only real newspaper that we have here in the city, saying, as a headline, empty words, no plan. You know, are you not afraid of being criticized for empty rhetoric and, as they call it, virtue signaling and all that?
No, I've been criticised before, and it doesn't. We're not interested in pursuing any of those agendas that I think have been hijacked by vested interest groups. So, I mean, Scott Morrison talks about the quiet Australians. Well, I would suggest that if you listen or if you see the latest media releases about 78% of people are concerned about climate change, then that's probably the quiet Australians there. I would think that it's in terms of who's making these noises, it's a very small rump, it's a very small minority that will continue to make these announcements. I don't know why, because it's pretty obvious to me what we have to do. And for our organisations, like we've thought about it. We know we're in we can do there's things that we can do, like our power. We've got solar panels. We've got about 40 solar panels, and we're going to look at expanding that. We're going to look at potentially buying electric vehicles in the future if we actually imported them into this country. That'd be a good start. And we're going to look at things like who we bank with, making sure that they've got good policies around carbon and I think from a practical point of view, what happens is people get overwhelmed by the enormity of it, and then as we fly off here and get on with our lives. But that doesn't mean that you have to. You don't declare an emergency. The reason you declare it is because you're signalling that it's something incredibly important, and then we have to do something about it now, because the world has gone through various Armageddons over time, hasn't it? And I think we really need to listen to our Indigenous brothers and sisters on this, because I think they're the custodians of the land, and they're the ones who have deep knowledge that we can't even, as Westerners, we don't even understand that. And they're the ones who I talk to them. I talk to the elders in our community, in the ethnic communities. I was with them a couple of days ago, and they all think that there's something wrong, and they're all totally committed to it. Now, I would suggest they're the quiet Australians, that they don't say much.
No, they're quiet and independent thinkers.
Yep.
People who have, as you say, who have vested interest and who have reasons for saying what they're saying. It's all a game, isn't it, for them? In a way, But I want to know, because this is a radio station where we actually have discussed already. There was a meeting for staff and volunteers about a month ago, where I suggested at that meeting, I put it on the agenda and said, what about if the Pulse declared a climate emergency? And in the room there was a bit of like mumble, a bit of criticism, the usual stuff. Isn't it just virtue signaling and all that? What are you going to say to the staff here at the radio station, who comes maybe to you and say, I'm not going to be part of this. No, I'm not going to be working on a radio station that has declared a climate emergency.
Yeah, well,
what will you say?
I'm more than happy to talk to them about the reasons why we've declared it, and we think it's critical to our future. And the reality is that I think I haven't heard. I'll be interested to see if someone actually comes to me, because I don't know if they will, or if I don't think so, and I'm quite happy to kind of say, well, that's the decision that the board have made, and we have to move on from here, and we've made the declaration, and we need to do things about it. We are taking quite a conservative line here, so we are being very conservative by saying these things cannot continue to go on, and I think that's the line that we've got to do, because it's the future of our children and their children, and it's mass. We're talking mass extinction, not just of many species, and that's the other thing that we declared a biodiversity, which I think people aren't focusing enough on. It's biodiversity, and it's about, that's really critical, So we're going to look at different things. We're going to look at blue carbon farming. Maybe we can purchase a property somewhere and develop some blue carbon initiatives. There's different things you can do, I think.
Yeah, that's
it's
right.
Not all
Absolutely.
hopeless.
And Michael, I know we're not the only community radio station in Australia.
Yep.
And this is a question I noticed, but any idea how many there are? And in a way, Geelong could be the Darebin Council of climate emergency for local government, in terms of Yeah, being the
terms of
first
radio.
in terms of radio. Is there, how can we get this to other radio stations?
Well, I
Community
think.
radio stations.
Well, I think you email the ethnic broadcasters. You email the CBAA, the Community Broadcasters Association. I think you'll find it. You won't be on your own very long.
Well, no, it's not. Yeah, we won't.
We won't be on our own
And
very long.
maybe a vision could be that if we got together with a lot of community radios, we would be doing two things. We would be educating locally, by radio hosts that people trust because they know them. It's your local community radio. But apart from that, we could also send a signal upwards, and not towards the government as much as to the public broadcasters. ABC, SBS. I know you're doing good things here and there, like little things, like we have the ABC doing Q&A on Monday night. Excellent program, lots of talk about climate change, and in a democratic way, which I love. But that's 1 hour a week. Could we have that every day? Not Q&A, but information and something that also inspires us to action.
Mick,
something that shows us the vision of where we're going.
Mick, we have the ABC on the premises.
Yeah.
We should be putting recording this particular conversation and handing it over to Cam and saying, edit this down, this is newsworthy.
But you know
and
what?
then this conversation should be on the news and then snowballing onwards
I'm
from
sorry
there.
to say that's been there, done that. Years ago, we made a petition.
Well, let's
we
do
ran
it
a
again,
petition.
because as you say,
I
this
have
is news
talked
today.
personally with him out on the street, and it was like the feeling of, I felt ignored.
I
Let's
think
put it that way.
the
So the pressure has got to come not from one person talking to one person. It's got to be something collective. And that's the power of, if we do this the same way, now we have 1,000 councils that have joined together and created an alliance pushing upwards and downwards. What if radio stations did the same?
The Sustainable Hour.
For a green, clean, sustainable Geelong. The Sustainable Hour.